YouTube, Awesome Writer here. Today I am going to be ranking every female Red Ranger in Power Rangers so far, in honor of the announcement that Amelia is going to be our first full-time in the main series female Red Ranger. Now obviously for this video, I'm not going to be ranking Amelia, even though we do have a good feel for her as a character, and actually probably more of a feel for her as a character than some of the characters on this list, but we haven't gotten to see her in action as a Red Ranger yet. I might do an update, you know, in a year or whatever after we've seen her. Maybe there'll even be more female Reds by then, who knows. But I'm just going to be counting the ones that have actually debuted so far, and might go without saying, but I feel like people might bring it up, is I'm not also going to be ranking like the Super Mega Force team that the girls can transform into Reds. I don't even remember if they did that. I know there was a Gokai change where there was like female Reds, like female Magi Red, but I don't remember if we used that footage. But regardless, I feel like somebody would bring that up, and I'm not counting stuff like that. Let's get started with the list. Now, I want to be fair to these two at the bottom of the list, is that I don't necessarily dislike them. I know this is a ranking list, but this isn't one of the ranking lists where the bottom's like, ugh, they're trash. They're only at the bottom of the list because we've gotten the least time with them and have the least to talk about, and I think the least impression for me. So I want to be clear about that, because it's almost kind of unfair because they're very brief characters. So starting at the bottom of the list is Britt from the MMPR Pink comic. She was female MMPR Red from that. If you don't know, the MMPR Pink comic was a one-shot comic taking place after Kim had left the team in the original comics universe, and she basically gets drafted into this mission while the Rangers are off-world. They use her residual connection to her powers to give her like a temporary version of her powers that result in a unique costume. Zach and Trini join her, and two of her new friends fill out the team as Blue and Pink. And you know, I do dig the MMPR Pink costumes. I think they're kind of cool. I feel like we're going to get some eye rolls if they ever announce them for the Lightning Collection of like the anti-MMPR people, but I do want them in the Lightning Collection. So I do like the suit. I like the character just fine, but there's just not a lot to talk about. Like, I just feel like the comic was so brief that we really just got a gist of like, hey, this is Britt, this is sort of her personality, and there's just not as much interesting stuff to talk about, which is why she's at the bottom of the list. Coming up after that is Ryan, or however you pronounce it, which is the Squadron Red Ranger from the recent Power Rangers Universe comic, aka the Die Ranger adaptation, a female version of Ryu Ranger. Similarly to Britt, there's not a whole lot to talk about. I think we get a little bit more from her, but I feel like for the most part, most of the individual characters got lost in the shuffle in this comic, in my opinion, so you basically just get a baseline personality for her. The only reason I decided to rank her above Britt was because I like the Die Ranger suits a little bit more. I liked getting a female Ryu Ranger. I thought that was cool. And I liked the story overall of the team and their dynamic as a team and where they ended up as they became the emissaries. So that was more interesting to me, and it also gives you a lot more to talk about than a one-off fill-in Red Ranger. So like, they're both kind of in this category of, it's almost unfair because they don't get a lot to talk about and a lot of focus and a lot of time to digest compared to the other ones on this list. But she just had a little bit more happen to her than the others. After that on the list is our original female Red Ranger, Charlie, the A-Squad Red Ranger. Now, we technically also didn't get a lot of time with her, even comparing to the comics, but because we got to see her in live action, you know, you get to see a performance, so you get a little bit more of a taste for your opinion of her. And you know, it's not like she's the best, but I think she did a good job at the role she was meant to play, which is like an evil female leader. I mean, even if you are wearing a weird let's play paintball or laser tag with the the space helmets. But I think they did a good job with this. You know, I think the actress did a pretty solid job, very kind of campy evil, but I think she did a good job of selling the presence of a leader, and it was kind of interesting seeing the presence of a leader in the context of an evil Power Rangers team, and not just an evil Power Rangers team, but one that wasn't under any sort of spell. We got a very brief amount of time with her, but I think she was successful at conveying the evil leader of a PR team. I would honestly love to get more expansion on this version of the character, especially since it is kind of historic that she was the first female Red Ranger, I believe, obviously in PR, but I believe in both PR and Sentai. So if we do a comic, I would love to see something. Honestly, an A-Squad comic would be cool, or like an SPD story that has time for an A-Squad story, because I think that would be really interesting, and I would love to learn more about her time as a hero and then as a villain. I think that could be really cool, but we didn't get a lot of time with her, but I think she was effective with the time we got. After that, which is one I do want to rank higher, but there is reasons why the other ones are higher, is Lauren from Samurai. I honestly love Lauren. I really like her character. I think she was one of the bright spots of Samurai. I honestly really prefer her character and what they did with it to Shinkenger. I think the sister angle was less weird and also just felt more personal. Like, I don't know, I just got more attached to the story and I felt more invested in the story between her and Jaden. She was around very short only at the end, but I think they did a good job with a short amount of time conveying her character, the responsibility she felt as the head of the Sheba clan to use the sealing symbol, but also her attachment to her brother and how she felt about what this did to him. I also really like that the way they handled when she took over as leader. It wasn't like I hate our substitute teacher. Like, they legit worked with her and tried to work with her, and there was never any animosity, and they really did try to work with her. There was this element of them missing Jaden, but it wasn't like I hate the new girl, or it wasn't a replay of that storyline from Time Force where Alex took over. I really appreciated that. Like, there was clearly them missing Jaden and knowing how to work with him, but there was never any negative animosity, and it was kind of nice to see her work with the team, almost giving you like a what if, she was there from the beginning. And she was just overall a really likable character, and for the short amount of time we got to see her, I feel they actually did a pretty decent job in the context of Samurai. And we also got to see her as well in Shattered Grid, where she got expanded on a little bit, and I think she's been one of the bright spots of Samurai and one of the more bright spots of kind of the purgatory of the Neo Saban era, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of her again, whether it be in the comic or in live action. After that is Trini Kwan as Red Ranger twice over. She was briefly MMPR Red, and most recently has taken up the mantle as the Red Omega Ranger, if you don't know. Now, this is one I almost think that she should be number one if we're just talking about Ranger-wise, which I'll talk about when I get to number one, but comic Trini is so good. She's probably one of my favorite comic characters. I've never been a huge fan of show Trini. She's always been fine, but she was just always kind of there, kind of boring for me. But comic Trini is so much more interesting, just in general. Like, she's such a good character. But I think they did an overall good job of building her to be red without you knowing they were building her to be red. I mean, it started with the color swap arc, when the Rangers went through that portal and briefly swapped Ranger colors where she got to be red. And you sort of get a taste of like, hey, Trini actually might be pretty good as red. And then you build her character as a yellow Omega, which is I think where most of the character development came in. And they sort of subtly built it. It wasn't in a really obvious way where I felt like they were gearing up for it, at least in my opinion. But then when it happens and she takes over after Jason has to leave, it makes sense, and they really show her value as a leader and as a ranger, and she's just so much more of a complex and badass character, and she's really a quite cool Red Ranger, and something I really wasn't expecting. I mean, maybe there was more foreshadowing than I'm thinking to her being Red Ranger in the most recent arc. There was her stuff with Draken about him talking about her standing on her own a little bit, but I think I was just so focused and curious on how they were going to handle the Omegas at the time, because I'm curious, like, are they going to make them leave and try to line up with the show? What are they going to do? So, yeah, really kind of unexpected, like, arc of her becoming this Red Ranger twice over, and a really good, I think arguably the best female Red Ranger. But despite her being the best female Red Ranger, in my opinion, my number one pick personally is Grace, who is from the 1969 original MMPR Suicide Squad team. Now, again, I just want to say, I think if I were trying to be objective and saying who is truly the best Red Ranger, a female Red Ranger, it would probably be Trini, because we're just talking about being active as a Ranger. She's had the most time as a Ranger, both as yellow and red, but Grace has very brief time. Just personally, I like Grace a little bit more. Grace is one of my favorite comic characters. Trini is too, but I like Grace a little bit more because she's an original character and I find her to be a little bit more interesting in certain aspects. That's why she's number one, is because she's just my personal favorite, but I do think Trini is the best Red Ranger. But Grace is really interesting. You know, the idea of that 1969 origin squad was really cool because it set the precedent of like why Zordon picked the regular team we know, because he kind of picked these people that were skilled but they didn't know each other, and he kind of screwed them over, and they basically almost all died except for two of them. And then Grace kind of got ripped out of it, and she had this hatred for Zordon because she put them in this dangerous situation, and then not only that, but then after that he didn't allow her to continue to be a part of that world and be a Red Ranger, and she was always angry about that, so she carved out her own place in the Ranger world, becoming this big-time boss of her own thing, creating Promethea, creating the new Green Ranger, and I found her sort of like anger at Zordon and her kind of being almost the antithesis of him and having so many opposite points of view. Now she's working with him more, and I wish there was a little bit more in their conflict. But I found that to be incredibly interesting, and I found like her role to be interesting. The fact that even though she was a Red Ranger briefly, she very much had what it takes to be a Red Ranger in regards to why she was recruited. And the fact that she wasn't given the opportunity to continue to serve or be a part of that world, but she carved her own slice of the world out. I think that's really cool. And I just really like Grace's character. Again, it's a personal thing, but I think Trini is objectively the best Red Ranger because she's had the most development as an actual Ranger, whereas Grace was only a Ranger for a hot minute, but I find her to be an incredibly interesting character. But that is just my list for now. Again, I might do an update after Amelia gets her time as Red Ranger, or if we have any other further updates from the comics and stuff. I think I got everyone. I keep feeling like I'm forgetting somebody, like I almost forgot about MMPR Pink for a second. But let me know who your favorite female Red Rangers are from the ones you've experienced in the comics and the show. In the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps, ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.